Happy New Year, everybody. I'm Thaís Sky. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast. In this episode, I want to talk all about the worthiness wound, this pervasive sense of feeling deeply inadequate and broken and too much for the relationships that matter, and how it is deeply intertwined with New Year's resolution, because I'm really hopeful that this year is the year of your worth. This is the year where you begin to relate yourself in a different way so you can achieve the dreams, the goals, the vision that you have for yourself. And in order for us to do that, we have to think about New Year's resolutions a little bit differently. I also want to share with you some of my own personal learnings of 2024 in hopes that it will support you as you think about how you want to embark on your new year. So let's get into it. If you're new to the podcast, before I became a licensed psychotherapist, I was a depth-oriented coach for over 10 years. So I have taught, seen, learned a lot about what it means to live our best life, from pop psych, self-help, depth psychology, Buddhism, Hinduism, and yoga traditions. I have seen a lot. And in this podcast, I hope to disseminate some of those learnings and help you find what's going to work for you on your journey, so to speak, on your process of understanding yourself more deeply. Because I know that there can be a lot of information and a lot of misinformation. And when we are navigating something like the worthiness wound, that misinformation can really hurt and damage us. And so in this podcast, I hope to offer different ways of thinking about these popular concepts so that you can find what's going to work for you. And of course, because it is the new year, I have to talk about New Year's resolutions. New Year's resolutions is the piece de la résistance of worthiness wound conversations. Almost everyone that I work with or talk to who grapple with the worthiness wound, who grapple with the sense of feeling so inadequate, so broken, so insignificant, so unworthy, too much, too emotional, too broken, too messy, we struggle with New Year's resolutions. We struggle with goals in general. And in this podcast, I want us to give us a little bit of structure, a little bit of thought of how we can understand New Year's resolutions from hopefully a slightly different lens. But before I get into it, I do want to let you know that I currently have availability in my caseload. So if you are looking to work with a psychotherapist in 2025, if you're looking to tackle the worthiness wound once and for all, if you're looking for support around relational difficulties, anxiety, depression, transitions, but mostly if you're wanting to feel more of yourself, if you're wanting to learn how to kind of get out of your own way, out of self-defeating, self-sabotaging, painful dynamics and patterns, if you're feeling really stuck and you want something different in your life, then working together may be supportive for you. You can learn more by going to thaissky.com/therapy. I also do work with couples, and you can go to my website, thaissky.com, and learn more about how I work with couples. But I deeply believe, that we don't have to kind of navigate all of this alone. And part of why I really focus on creating, developing an expertise around the worthiness wound is precisely in order to help individuals who grapple with it, so that they can be more free, they can feel more spacious to go after the things that they want in life, or certainly to feel more of what they want to feel of themselves and in the relationships that matter to them. So again, you can go to thaissky.com/therapy. And as we're talking about the worthiness wound, I have to also kind of drop in here that my ebook, Reclaiming Worth, is free and is available for you to download. It was released in December. I'm so proud of this ebook. It is about a 50-page PDF all about the worthiness wound, all about the ways in which the worthiness wound may manifest in your life, how it may be showing up, what it may be really about, right? Like, what is the worthiness wound and how did it come about in your psyche, as well as some ways that we can begin to tend and address this really tender part within us, so that we can, feel a little bit more spacious in our lives. So you can go grab that free resource by going to thaissky.com/worth. All of this is in the show notes for all of you. Like I said, I really want this year to be a year of your worth. I want this to be the year where you feel like you can take up more space in your life, that you feel like you can be more confident and feel more capable, feel more like you are allowed to exist. I think a lot of us who grapple with worthiness wound tend to be very hard on ourselves, and we tend to feel really debilitated by that hardness. And when we can create soft landing places within us, when we can start to relate to ourselves a bit differently, things around us start to change too. I know that we're living in a scary time. I know that there's just so much going on around us all of the time. And the worthiness one is just like one more thing, right? And so Reclaiming Worth is that resource. It's to support you in your year of worth. I'm hopeful that this podcast will also support that, as well as individual work with me, or, there's all sorts of things I'm dreaming up of creating this year that I hope will be supportive of the goal of 2025 being the year of your worth. Okay, so when I look around the internet around this time of the year, I tend to see a lot of posts around this idea of this is the year I'm going to start doing blank, or this is the year I'm going to stop blank. This is the year I'm going to prioritize me. This is the year that I'm going to stop accepting people's bullshit. This is the year I'm going to start advocating for myself more. This is the year that I'm not going to let people walk all over me anymore. And these types of posts get a lot of like. They tend to go viral. They tend to be shared a lot because there's something I think really, really empowering around this idea of like, this is a new year and I am now going to really take on something about myself that I've been really struggling with, and I am going to face it head on. There's something really beautiful about that. There's something really vivacious and alive about that. And I think it's one of the reasons why I love the new year so much, even though it's a weird time of the year, right? Because we are, for many of us, in the dead winter. We are facing the desire for slowness. It's very dark outside. We're wanting to be very tender, very soft, and yet we're also riding this excitement of the new year. And I think that juxtaposition can make it hard to then know, wait, is this a time to steam on ahead, or is this a time for us to be in reflection and to be in slowing down mode? Do we listen to our bodies that's telling us like, this is the time for reflection? Or do we listen and gain this momentum that's all around us in our culture, telling us this is now the time to bulldoze, to go forth, to set those goals, to get excited about the upcoming year? It can be a really hard conflict, a tension that I think many of us are grappling with. And because I think we have a really hard time holding excitement, I think so many of us have a really, really hard time navigating a momentum or a nervousness or an anticipation. That energy, I think, gets easily turned against ourselves. Why do we have such a hard time holding excitement? It's interesting because when I talk to people, I often find that people really like to define their emotions as negative or positive. Negative emotions being, for example, emotions like frustration or anger or disappointment, whereas positive emotions are happiness, joy, etc. But I find that those two ways of categorizing emotions to not really reflect, I think, what's more accurate about our emotional life, which is that there are emotions that feel familiar and feel easy for some of us to experience. For some of us, anger may actually be a very easy emotion for us to get in touch with, or sadness may be a really easy emotion for us to get in touch with. Usually not both, but it's interesting, right? How oftentimes they are intertwined. Or some of us may have a really easier time getting in touch with frustration or resentment or envy, and have a much harder time getting in touch with certain emotions like excitement, like anticipation, like joy. And so if we have a hard time getting in touch with certain emotions like excitement when it is around us, like the New Year's, and we already have a hard time with it, I think it makes sense that we then find ourselves kind of trying to trying to go back or revert back to emotional experiences that are familiar, that we are really good at feeling. And so instead of being able to hold the excitement or the momentum of the new year or our dreams and our goals and our potential, we revert back to self-loathing or self-criticism or a sense of frustration that we're not as far as we want to be, or a sense of annoyance that we are getting in the way of the things that we want to get in the way of. And so again, instead of categorizing your emotions as positive and negative, see what happens differently for you when you categorize them in terms of what feels familiar, what feels easier to navigate, easier to hold, versus what feels harder to hold, what feels harder to navigate. And it may seem counterintuitive at first, because what I'm not talking about here is it feeling good. I'm not saying it feels good to feel frustrated. But I am saying that certain emotional experiences feel so familiar to us that it's easier for us to go to those emotional experiences than other ones. And so when we're talking about New Year's and we're talking about the excitement around us, for some of us, it may be really hard to hold that excitement, to hold the anticipation of something new. For so many of us, it is tremendously hard to stay in touch with the uncertainty that we don't actually know. We don't know what the new year is going to bring. We don't know what's going to happen politically or environmentally. We don't know what's going to happen in our family units. We just don't know. We can predict or we can anticipate or we can wonder, but we cannot know until it is happening. And so for those of us, for many of us who have a hard time with that, because to feel uncertain means to feel unstable. And to feel excited means to be aware that there's something that we don't quite have yet, that we don't quite know how it's going to turn out. Because that can feel really hard to hold, I think it makes a lot of sense that then we try to move towards what is familiar, like self-loathing, like stubborn, frustration at our stubbornness, or annoyance at our inability to do the thing that we want to do or to experience what we want to experience. And so this is where I think New Year's resolution comes in, because I think it's a tool, a way that we move from excitement, anticipation, and the unknowing into some type of control. Because a lot of times New Year's resolutions are a way that we're trying to gain some type of control. I wrote this on my Instagram. I wrote, resolutions are often about controlling outcomes. Changing how we feel about ourselves, on the other hand, is about connection with ourselves, our needs, and our inherent worth. So I'm going to break all of that down a little bit more here. But if we're thinking about New Year's resolution as a way to try to control the uncertainty of the new year, now we can, I think, more deeply appreciate the role that New Year's resolutions is trying to play for us. And maybe then that allows us to hold New Year's resolutions a little bit more loosely. That maybe it's less about the actual resolution in and of itself, and more, it speaks more deeply to the fact that we are feeling really scared. We are feeling so aware of how much is unknown. And in a way, we're trying to digest these feelings by moving into what we do know or what we can do. And that's why it feels empowering, right? To feel empowered or to feel like we are in power of is to move from out of control to control. And so even though I think sometimes we use the words empowerment or the word empowerment to explain something quote unquote positive, I do think that it is not always the case. That sometimes we try to empower ourselves, moving from feeling out of control to control in a way that's actually quite detrimental to our ultimate health or our ultimate well-being. Okay, so if we're thinking about New Year's resolutions as a tool, as an attempt to control the outcome, then how may we navigate or hold resolutions a little bit differently? Maybe now we can think about it as, okay, so I'm aware that I'm feeling really scared, or I'm feeling like I'm anticipating the new year and I'm wanting to bring a little bit more intention or a little bit more structure to make so much of the unknown that is the new year a little bit more digestible. Maybe even just thinking about it that way will help you think about New Year's resolutions a little bit differently. What goals or what intentions or what ideas you want to hold right now that will help anchor you a little bit, that will help you feel a little bit more certain or a little bit more comfortable in the face of so much newness and so much uncomfortableness, so much uncertainty. Now, before I get much further, I do want to break down the worthiness wound a little bit more, because I'm assuming that you know what that means. And maybe you're a longtime listener, maybe you've already gotten my ebook, and maybe you do know what that means, but maybe you're brand new to the podcast. And if you are, welcome. Hi, I'm so glad that you're here. And so if you are new, or if you've never heard of the worthiness wound, or you just want to hear it one more time, let me break it down a little bit more for you. The worthiness wound is a concept that I coined after I became very curious about this phenomenon that I experienced in myself and in the people that I worked with where we were chronically relating to the world, chronically relating to ourselves, like there is something really wrong with us. There's something really broken within us. We are missing something really critical. We are feeling so not enough. We don't feel enough of ourselves to be the type of person we want to be. We don't feel enough of ourselves to enter the type of relationships we want to enter. We leave interactions, we leave social engagements, we leave work experiences feeling like we're so messed up. We are missing something really important. We're getting all of the social cues wrong, or all of the conversations felt awkward, or we're just feeling like no matter how hard we try, we can't seem to get it right. We can't seem to feel good about ourselves, right? That is the worthiness wound. The worthiness wound also looks like, on the other stuff, opposite side of the coin of the worthiness wound, is a sense of feeling too much. I'm too much for the relationships that matter. I'm too messy. I'm too emotional. My emotions are too disturbing, too chaotic. I can't seem to be able to feel my emotions in a way that doesn't destroy the relationships that matter to me. I feel like I am so messy and so overwhelming for people. Mostly, I feel so overwhelming for myself. There's something really wrong here, because when I feel something, I feel it so overwhelmingly. This is all the worthiness wound. And I coined this term. I wanted to bring attention to this predicament because, one, it was something that I'm grappled with and continue to grapple with. And I wanted to name my experience. And by doing so, I felt so less alone in it. And so much more understood in my psyche. So there was that part of it. But I also really wanted to create something that was going to be supportive for people who felt similarly. Because I'm not the only one. There are so many of us who feel this way. And I wanted to understand that. Like, what is going on here for us? Why do we feel this way? Because it defies logic in many ways. We know, we're being told, you are good enough. You are great. We love you. You're wonderful. You're amazing. And it doesn't land. It doesn't change this innate feeling in ourselves that there is something so messed up, so wrong about us. We feel so worthless, so low self-esteem, such a sense that no matter what we do, we can't seem to get it right because we never feel enough. And so we're constantly chasing this feeling of enoughness. And we fantasize that if we achieve this feeling of enoughness, we would finally be able to rest. We would finally be able to feel good about ourselves. And as you can see, as you're maybe hearing me talk, New Year's resolutions fit so beautifully into this fantasy. If I could just fix certain things about myself, I will feel differently about myself. And if I feel differently about myself, then I will finally feel worthy enough for the things that I want in my life. So New Year's resolutions can really tie beautifully into the worthiness wound as a tool of oppression, as a tool to keep us feeling like you are broken and you need to be fixed. There is a lot of self-improvement rhetoric going on around this time of the year. And so much of it has this implication that there is something wrong with you. There is indeed, you are indeed broken. And if you want to feel good about yourself, you're going to have to fix what is broken. Now, the difficult thing about this is that their seduction is very, very strong. It feels, especially when we're being inundated by it, when the messages are all over, that if you could just look different or act different or feel different about yourself or about other people, then everything would feel better. That idea is pervasive. And it is pervasive because the personal development world is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is pervasive because we live in a culture that really values kind of self-actualization, but only to the extent that then we can be proper tools for capitalism. And I think what gets really tricky for those of us with the worthiness wound is that that's not to say that there aren't ways that we can improve, or there aren't things that we can admit maybe to ourselves and to each other that there's a limitation or a weak spot. Maybe we would like to change certain things about ourselves. But while it is a worthiness wound that is operating and propelling us towards our New Year's resolution, there's two things that happen. One, the goalposts will always keep moving. because we're going to constantly feel like we have to actually be in the striving of, we are broken. We have to fix what is broken. And so when we achieve that goal and we still don't feel like we are fixed, then the goalpost needs to move. So there's always a sense of not enoughness. The goalposts are different. And the goalposts can sometimes be different, and sometimes they can be they can counter each other. Like sometimes the worthiness wound manifests as saying like, well, if only you were louder and stood up for yourself more, then you would feel better and more confident. Oh my gosh, how could you have said all that? You shouldn't have said all that. By saying all that and exposing yourself, you are showing how broken you are to the world, right? So there's no winning. That is a very important metric of the worthiness wound, is that the chase, the constant striving towards a goal, towards a betterment, never actualizes into a state of feeling enough. So that's number one. And number two, the goals tend to be very black and white and very moralistic and very vague language. With people that struggle with a worthiness wound, there tends to be a lot of feeling bad, feeling wrong, feeling broken. There's a lot of these words that are used to describe this kind of vague sense of something being off. And it's hard to pinpoint what exactly is off. It's hard to even sit with what is off. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of shame. But there's just like this general vague sense of there's something wrong with me and I need to figure out what that is and I need to pinpoint it and I need to fix it. But we can't ever seem to pinpoint or fix it. So we're just kind of constantly being caught up in this space of just feeling like there's something wrong. There's something going on. There's something pervasively broken in me. And because there's no words for it, it feels unmetabolized. It feels undigested. It feels like it constantly gets stuck in us. And so, people with worthiness wounds, they tend to relate to New Year's resolutions in kind of one or two ways. Either I'm too bad, I'm too broken to ever achieve my goals and dreams. And so I'm not even going to look at New Year's resolutions. Like I'm not even going to believe in goals. I'm not going to have dreams because who am I to have dreams? Who am I to want something of myself? I'm so broken. I'm so worthless that there's no point in that. Or it's, the running and the, I need to change something of myself. And there's like an urgency and there's this self-loathing that often goes along with it of why are you so messed up? Why are you so incapable of getting your shit together? Like what the fuck is wrong with you? The inner critic is really, really loud for those of us with worthiness wounds. And by the way, talking about the difference between self-esteem and self-worth and the role that the inner critic plays, this is all highlighted in my ebook, Reclaiming Worth. So I go into more details about those things in my ebook in case you want to learn more. And so it makes sense, right? That resolutions often stem from a worthiness wound. And this is what I wrote on my Instagram. I wrote, the worthiness wound loves a good New Year's resolution because it feeds on the belief that you're only lovable if you fix yourself. And lovable is an interesting word there because we don't often think of it in this terms. We don't often think of like, oh, if only I could be different, then I could be lovable. But it definitely feels that way. To feel accepted, to feel loved, to feel supported, to feel worthy. These words can feel interchangeable for those of us that are struggling with the worthiness wound. But the New Year's resolution really feeds on the belief that you can only get X, whether that's acceptance, love, worth, esteem. You can only get these things if you fix yourself. The problem lies in something being deeply wrong with you. Okay, so then I wrote, every New Year around this time, I am reminded how deeply intertwined New Year's resolutions are to the worthiness wound. It's so seductive to believe that if we could just fix ourselves in some permanent way, we would feel better about ourselves. This urgency to fix something of oneself, to change a deeply ingrained way of being, to suddenly be different, all stem from a belief that we are broken, unlovable, and inadequate for the feelings and connections we want. It's rare to see a New Year's resolution that isn't rooted in self-loathing because they are often punitive, dismissive of our humanity, and unrealistic. They set up a month or two of feeling like a failure for not living up to these self-imposed expectations. But often we do this because we don't know of a better way. We think this is how change happens. It's what all the experts on building habits will tell you, right? What they don't tell you is that rigidly demanding ourselves to be different may create different habits, but it won't change how you feel about yourself because that is an inside job. So what if instead of resolutions, we gave ourselves permission to explore what we truly need, to meet ourselves where we are with compassion instead of trying to mold ourselves into someone we think the world will finally approve of? Resolutions are often about controlling outcomes. Changing how we feel about ourselves is about connection with ourselves, our needs, and our inherent worth. Let this be the year you gently shift your focus from fixing to feeling, from striving to being, and from punishing to nurturing. This is self-worth in action. Now, there's a lot to this post that I want to slow down and break down a little bit more. First, the urgency. Wherever we find ourselves relating to something inside of ourselves with urgency, we have to fix, we have to change. There's something really wrong, whether that's happening in a relationship, whether that's happening inside of ourselves. And we then immediately move into, what can I do about this? There's often a sign that there's something else going on underneath. Wherever we are relating ourselves with urgency and rigidity, there's often something else going on. There's some wound, there's some pain, there's something that we are hoping that we can, with urgency, with quickness, evacuate and move out of, move forward from. So whenever you notice yourself moving into urgency, there is something of an invitation there for you. This happens a lot. People come to work with me, and sometimes they come in with like, okay, let's get to work. Tell me what to do. Let's go. Let's move forward. It's time. And while I, on the one hand, love and appreciate that enthusiasm for all the reasons I listed, here on the podcast about the beauty of enthusiasm, the kind of excitement and the potential and the getting in touch with the hope, and all of this is wonderful. When we are operating with an urgency, there is also this fantasy that if we do something quickly, we don't really have to feel it at all. It's kind of like ripping a Band-Aid. If we rip the Band-Aid fast, the thing is, we don't feel the slow pulling of the skin. That's nice. We like that, right? Because the slow pulling of the skin, it hurts. It's painful. And so the metaphor of ripping off the Band-Aid is quick, speed, move on. And so when we're approaching inner work, when we're approaching relating to ourselves with urgency, what may be happening for some of us is that we are unconsciously operating with the fantasy that if we can do this fast, we don't have to feel this at all. It can just happen. We can just change without really confronting ourselves, without really facing the pain, without really understanding more deeply what is going on. We can bypass all of that by just going super fast. Doesn't work that way. Speed and healing do not often go hand in hand. That's not to say that we can't experience moments, breakthroughs, ahas, these kind of quick bursts of something powerful happening. Of course, that's possible. But that is not, if we're relating to healing with the wish for speed, we're, one, falling prey, probably, to the lies of capitalism, to the lies that these so-called experts are telling you. You can heal your trauma in 3 months or whatever. This is a lie. You cannot do that. No one can guarantee how long it takes to heal something. They're selling something to you, okay? It's their snake oil man thing going on there. Speed. So there's this kind of getting caught. There's a scam part of this where we're probably getting caught in some lie that someone told us. And so then we feel like there's something really wrong when things are taking time. But the only way that things can really be, especially inside, can really change on a permanent basis is if it takes time. And I've seen this after 15 years doing this work. Like, I just keep seeing it over and over and over. Real lasting change, transformation, whatever you want to call it, takes time. It just does. It takes a baking in process. It takes slow incremental shifts. Slow breakthroughs are so much more powerful, so much more effective than these fastings. Like, I'm going to go into a session and in a month, I'm going to change my worthiness wound. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so the urgency to change ourselves deeply stem from a belief that we're broken, unlovable, and inadequate for the feelings and connections we want. Okay. New Year's resolutions tend to be punitive, don't they? They tend to be like, there's no like stretchiness of it. There's no what am I looking for? Flexible thought in New Year's resolutions. They tend to be very black, like I said before, black and white, punitive, and oftentimes very intertwined with, if you're not going to the gym 5 times a week, who are you? You're lazy, you're unproductive, you're bad, you're wrong. This kind of way of thinking is very, very painful because it really sets us up to fail. Okay, it's often unrealistic. We suddenly want to go from one extreme to another with New Year's resolutions. We want to go from somebody who goes to the gym maybe once a week to now going 5 times a week. And oftentimes the reason why New Year's resolutions fail, of course, is because they don't actually help. They are trying to fix a problem with the same kind of mindset, same way of relating that created the problem in the first place. For example, we really want to, let's do the gym example. We don't go to the gym now. We want to start going, and we want to start going 4 to 5 times a week. And so we just then set the alarm and set the expectation that we'll go. Meanwhile, we're not maybe looking at, well, why haven't we gone to the gym? What's really going on there? What feelings do we have about exercise or about our bodies or about cultural expectations of our bodies? Are we wanting to go to the gym because we hate how we look? How is that going to work out for you then? Are you going to the gym because you want to be healthier? What does that mean to be healthier? If we're going to the gym every day and we're attacking and criticizing and self-loathing the entire time, is that healthier than not going to the gym and not experiencing that self-loathing? What does healthy mean? So one of the things that I think is important for New Year's resolution, instead of thinking of it like things I will stop doing in the new year, to instead think about it in terms of things I commit to working on, sure, and getting support for in the new year, right? Like, what things do I want more support around? If you want to start going to the gym more often, what type of support may you need to make that happen? Now, that's a different way of relating to a goal. And that's the thing about New Year's resolution, is that inherently in them, there's nothing bad about goals and dreams and wanting to improve oneself. This idea of like, you're not a problem that needs to be fixed sounds nice. I like to think of it that way. But that doesn't mean that you don't have things you want to improve on and can't want to improve on. You're more than welcome to want to improve things of yourself. That's wonderful. In fact, I think people who don't kind of see anything within themselves that they don't want to change, they're not really introspective, and they're not self-aware, and they're not maybe kind of thinking and relating to themselves in a growth-oriented way. We can be growth-oriented. We can want the best things for ourselves and not be doing it because we are a problem that needs to be fixed. And that is always the fine line. That is the conversation I'm having over and over and over again with all sorts of different people. The big question, how do I accept myself and want to change? And this idea of acceptance is tricky because we often think to accept oneself means that we get to just be who we are. And that we'll never, if we accept ourselves, we'll never experience self-loathing. Or if we accept ourselves, we will never experience cognitive dissonance, or we won't ever experience moments of frustration with ourselves. That's not what acceptance is. Acceptance is a way of relating to ourselves where we can appreciate and understand that we are human, that we have limits, that we mess up, that we harm, that we make mistakes, that we are imperfect. And rather than going towards self-loathing or shame or or the worthiness wound, right? Like there's something really wrong and broken within you. What if it were to be more like, of course I make mistakes and this is painful and this hurts and I'm so sorry that I hurt this person and I want to do better and I'm going to do better and I'm going to commit to getting the type of support I need in order to do better. That's different. It's just radically different. By the way, every year, I do some type of New Year's resolution episode on my podcast. This is not a new topic here. And I've decided to create a website, a page that has all of the New Year's resolution podcast episodes on it. for easy access for you. And so if you go to the show notes, you'll get the link to go there and you'll see some resources and some support for you as you are thinking about your New Year's resolution. So the things I'm talking about here today, I talk about it in different ways in different episodes, but it's all generally the same thing because I still deeply believe these things. Okay, back to this post. So it's not that New Year's resolutions in and of themselves is bad or problematic. It is though, it often is a tool for the worthiness wound. And there are ways that we can develop goals for ourselves that isn't punitive. It is possible. I know that may feel hard to imagine, but it is possible. Sometimes, though, it may mean prioritizing healing and tending and addressing the worthiness wound first before setting yourself up to have goals and intentions, etc. Like maybe for, some people, it's helpful for them to pause on putting any type of New Year's resolution for a while to kind of reestablish a relationship with themselves that's not based out of self-loathing, and then eventually reintroduce New Year's resolutions back into their lives when they start to feel like they can handle it. Okay. Rigidly demanding ourselves to be different may create different habits, but it won't change how we feel about ourselves. And this is a really hard lesson for so many of us, that we bring ourselves wherever we go. You may now be the type of person that goes to the gym 5 days a week, and you may feel better in different ways, and that may be wonderful. But it's probably not going to change the worthiness wound, and it's probably not going to change the deeper sense of feeling really, really broken. What it may do to develop an ongoing relationship with going to the gym is it may start to build your self-esteem. It may start to kind of help you count on yourself because you are making a commitment to yourself and then you're upholding it. That's how we build self-trust in many ways, is by upholding the commitments that we make to ourselves and other people. So it's not all lost. Like New Year's resolutions and upholding it, like going to the gym 5 times a week, may build those things, maybe not, because if you don't have the right systems or the right examination, the right intent, it's going to be much harder to uphold that resolution. But I'm not saying that doing these things can't change something of ourselves, but we want to be careful about what we hope it will change. Do we hope that it's going to change the worthiness wound? And the answer is the way that we address and change and tend to the worthiness wound is by addressing and tending and changing the worthiness wound, not doing all these side quests. These side quests may build a good foundation, but if you want to feel different about yourself, you're going to have to start tackling what's going on internally for you. Okay, let's see what else here. Like I said before, right? Resolutions are often about controlling outcomes, okay? And here's the wild thing. Often what we're seeking when we're setting New Year's resolutions is a feeling. And what that feeling is the ability to hold our own goodness. That's what we're really seeking with New Year's resolutions. We're seeking the ability to hold ourselves with goodness, that we are good people, that we are worthy people. But New Year's resolutions is not the way to do that. The way to do that is by fostering connection with ourselves, our needs, our emotional well-being, and our inherent worth, right? So if we want to change how we feel about ourselves, we're going to have to start getting very interested and curious about what feelings we have about ourselves. We're going to have to start to courageously face the worthiness wound and start to, through therapy, through whatever support you're getting, encounter difficulties in your ability to foster connections, because the worthiness wound is a relational wound. I talk more about this in my ebook, Reclaiming Worth. It's a relational wound. It has to be repaired in relationships. And so getting the right type of support, like relational psychotherapy, which is what I do, or be engaging in conversations with the people around you to kind of cultivate worthiness, a type of ability to hold our goodness, is going to be a really important part of the work. Because ultimately what we're looking for in addressing the worthiness wound is that worthiness is an orientation. It's a way of holding ourselves with our goodness in mind. It is a feeling of goodness And that feeling of goodness, there's things that we can do to cultivate those feelings of goodness. And there are ways in which we have to face earnestly the bad feelings, the feelings of badness, the feelings of inadequacies, the feelings of too muchness, to try to understand what is going on there in order for us to not be so afraid of it and have to then prove something to the world in order to compensate for these feelings of it. Because when we're proving something to the world, I want to prove that I'm worthy of this, we are believing we are not worthy of it. We're trying to prove to ourselves and the world. We're trying to compensate for our badness. It's a lot of work. And so worthiness is not a destination. It's not a now I feel worthy, now I feel good, now I've arrived. It's an orientation. It's a way of holding ourselves where we can keep our goodness in mind, keep the goodness of other people in mind as we're tackling difficult feelings like shame and guilt and inadequacy, etc., etc. Okay? And one way that we can ask ourselves, right, is like, if I felt worthy, if I could keep my goodness in mind, what types of goals would I have? What types of dreams would I have? And maybe that could be useful for you. Maybe that will stir something up for you. Okay, my final message here about the worthiness wound is that part of what makes this time of the year so difficult is because on some level, we deeply believe that we would be okay if only we could change something permanent about ourselves. And I get the temptation, I get the seduction, but it really sets us up for a year of self-loathing because it feeds into this very pervasive pattern that there's something really wrong with us. The New Year's resolutions is so often a tool that keeps us stuck in the worthiness wound. And it's amazing how we're choosing on some level to be in this familiar but painful pattern of disappointment and self-loathing and like we are a problem that needs to be fixed, all because it's much more comfortable. It's more familiar to be here than to face the uncertainty of a new year and to hold the excitement and the joy and the novelty of something new. And that sucks. The worthiness wound is painful because it is so familiar. And then we find ways to stay in that cycle of pain. Getting support is instrumental. And also noticing the ways in which we are finding excuses on some level to continue to feel bad about ourselves is important. It's an important way of breaking this pattern, breaking this way of relating. Yes? Okay? So let's think about New Year's resolutions differently, my friends. Let's set up our year differently, okay? All right, let's talk a little bit about some of my takeaways from 2024. 2024 was a really wild year for me. I've been spending some time in reflection. I really enjoyed my year in review writing group. It was the first ever writing group that I put together and I loved it. It was so wonderful getting to meet some of you and to be in space with you as we spent some time reviewing 2024 together. I fully intend on doing it again next year. So stay tuned for that. If you're not on my newsletter list, go to thaissky.com/email. And then you'll get on my newsletter list and you'll get access to all sorts of things that I got cooking up for 2025. Anyway, so one of the things that I took away is that engaging in relationships is always better and always harder. Engaging in relationships is always better, but harder, especially those with us that grapple with a worthiness wound. A worthiness wound is a relational wound. It is born out of relationships. That means that relationships, for those of us with a worthiness wound, it's exquisitely difficult. It's difficult to communicate our needs to people. It's difficult to be in conflict with people. It's difficult to try not to mind read and try to be ourselves while we are so wired to try to guess how other people are thinking and feeling about us. So I wrote this down. I wrote, it's a common misconception, I think, that the more we engage in life, the happier we become. I think it's more accurate to say the more we engage in life, the more richer life becomes. And what makes life rich? Moments of joy, surely, but also moments of pain, confusion, and struggle. This is a year that I really chose relationships in a different way. I chose to engage in relationships, friendships with people that I want to owe something to. And this is very counter to a lot of what we see online and a lot of cultural conversations around this idea that we don't owe anything to anyone, that we're not responsible for people, that people have to be on their own. And this highly individualistic way of looking at relationships really undermines the power of communal care. And that if we want to be in community, we know on some level that we are communal creatures, that we benefit tremendously from caring about other people and being cared for. And that if we want to be in community, then there is a certain amount of taking on of other people's pain that's important. It's not to say that we need to do the work for them. I'm not talking about codependency or whatever word we're using to suggest that there's a unhealthiness taking on-ness of relationshiping. What I am speaking of is that if we want somebody to come over to our house and give us soup when we're sick, we have to be willing to do that for people, right? Like we have to be engaging in the types of relationships where we do these things for each other, where we surprise each other, where we give things to each other, where we're keeping people in mind. If we want to be kept in mind, and I've been doing that in 2024 in a different way, and engaging in life in this way, engaging in relationships in this way, for me was tremendously beneficial. It feels so nice in so many ways to be involved in relationships where it feels like other people are keeping my well-being in mind, care about me, want to help me. And it's also been exquisitely difficult because when we start engaging more deeply in relationships, whether we're choosing to get into a partnership, whether we're choosing to invest in more friendships, for feeling very lonely, we're going to need to engage in more relationships, right? We're going to have to engage. Now, what do I mean by engage? I don't mean have more relationships. I mean engage more earnestly in the process and experience of being in relationship, which means naming when we're hurt by something. It means being honest with people. It means saying no. It means trying to find ourselves in relationships. I run a process group, and I like the subtitle of it that I like to call it is How to Be Together Without Falling Apart. How can we be in connection with people without losing something of ourselves? This is the process that I've been really deeply engaging in this past year. And it's added a lot to my life. And by added a lot, I mean it has added joy, and it has also added a lot of pain. Pains of feeling left out, pains of miscommunication, pains of feeling misunderstood, pains of having to say things that I didn't want to say, having to defend myself, or making mistakes, harming people. Can we engage in conversations of harm without it meaning that there's something so bad about us? And we harm all the time. We hurt people all the time. And knowing how to apologize and owning it up, and being in that process of engaging in repair with people without falling apart is so advanced relational skill. When we're lacking clarity, when we're wanting some type of parameter in our lives that we're seeking in New Year's resolutions, what is often actually better, because what is actually going to feed and nourish us, as counterintuitive as it may sound, but what we're actually seeking is connection. Remember my Instagram post here. Changing how we feel about ourselves is about connection with ourselves, our needs, and our inherent worth. Rather than seeking clarity by trying to demand something different of yourself, what we're really wanting in the different experience of ourselves comes out of connection. It comes out of engaging in relationships with people and ourselves. It comes out of being more honest with ourselves. There's a beautiful Carl Jung quote where he talks about loneliness as a result of us not being fully honest with ourselves. And I really love that. How often do we lie to ourselves? Do we not engage in earnest conversations with the people that matter? And then we feel so inadequate and so broken. And we feel inadequate and broken because we fantasize that if we were whole, if we were lovable, then we wouldn't have to grapple with these things. But that's just not true. It's just not true. And I found this year that by engaging in relationships, my life got so much richer and so much harder. And yet I felt so much more whole than I have felt in previous years where I chose not to prioritize relationships. And that was a big lesson for me. Takeaway number 2 of my 2024, contraction doesn't always mean that there's something wrong. I experienced a pretty significant contraction in my life this past year, and I felt like this was a sign. This was a sign from the universe that there was something wrong, that I had to change something significant about myself. And it's very challenging when we experience something difficult, like a contraction, like things kind of falling apart in some way. We don't get the goal that we want, or we put ourselves out there, we risk something and it doesn't work out. It can feel very seductive to go into that this is a sign that we're not meant to get it, or this is a sign there's something wrong with us. And to go and to experience that loss through the lens of trying to make meaning. And we are meaning-making machines. This is what we do. We're always making meaning of things. And there's so much information about how we're making meaning of things. That's much more important than the meaning itself. It's much more useful to think about, why is it that when you make a mistake, you go to the meaning that there's something wrong with you, or that you're broken, or that you're a terrible person. It's much more interesting to think about why you go towards that meaning than it is to think about that you are a terrible person. So however way you can create space in your life to examine the ways in which you're making meanings of things and how you're making meanings of things can offer a lot of information. The worthiness wound is a very unimaginative way of relating to ourselves. It's a very boring, it leads to very boring conclusions, and it's the same conclusions over and over and over again. And that's the sign that there's a worthiness wound. When we're making meanings of things in the exact same way, over and over and over again. Oh, that person's upset by me, it means that I am bad. Oh, this person tried to correct my work, it must mean that I am bad, right? If we're always concluding to that, one, that's a sign that there's a wound at play, right? Rigidity of that kind, rigidity of the mind is always a sign of wounding, of pain, of suffering. The worthiness wound is like other wounds. It's an emotional wound. It's a way that we have concretized our pain into some type of meaning about ourselves. It's very unoriginal. It's very predictable. And it's then an opportunity for us to learn something about ourselves. Why are we going in that direction? Why are we making that mean that? What's going on for us? And oftentimes we'll go so quick into the meaning and into that feeling that we're skipping over a whole bunch of other thoughts and feelings that are actually much more difficult to bear. Often a sign of our healing, that we're healing, is we're having different thoughts. And I know that that's not a seductive way of thinking about healing, because a lot of louder people with bigger audiences than mine are going to tell you that healing means all these very flashy things. But as a psychoanalytic psychotherapist who does deeper work with people, right, we really try to get to the root of the things. We really try to change something deeper about ourselves. I find that a surprising but powerful sign of healing is that we're having different thoughts. We're making different meanings. We're having different ideas about how things are. That is a sign that our mind is growing in its flexibility. That is a sign that we're working through the worthiness wound, when we're no longer directly going towards there's something wrong here. So experiencing the contraction that I experienced this year, I found myself going over and over and over again to that same place. There's something bad here. There's something wrong here. What I really tried to keep in mind this year was, rather than focusing on the contraction and that things were falling apart, the meaning I was making to the contraction, to stay with the pain of the contraction, to stay with the fact that when things don't go our way, it hurts and it shakes us up. It shakes up our core understanding of ourselves, and it really forces us to encounter difficult feelings of pain and suffering and loss. And so I tried really hard to be in that this year, and it is truly a hard thing to do. We often, I think, really want to go towards very predictable parts of ourselves rather than encountering a new level of grief and loss and change and pain. However, what happens when we do that, what happens when we face more earnestly our pain, is that we then start to experience something of ourselves a little bit differently. So that was a kind of big takeaway for me for this past year. The final takeaway, and I think it kind of ties back into the first one about relationships, is the best way that we can advocate for ourselves. The best way to advocate for ourselves is to learn how to do it in the moment that it's happening. And of course, that is incredibly hard to do. In the moment, we're feeling dysregulated, we're feeling overwhelmed, we're feeling flooded. We may not even know that a boundary is being crossed or violated. We may not even recognize that we're feeling off about something. We're just in the moment, right? And we don't even notice that there's something off until after the fact. When we leave the interaction feeling like there's something wrong with us, or we're leaving the interaction feeling like we're too much. Gosh, we're so much. Why did we say all that? Instead of like point number 2, instead of immediately then being like, yeah, I am broken. Yeah, making a conclusion, right? Okay, so that means that next time I'm not going to share as much about myself, right? Instead of immediately assuming that the worthiness wound is correct and that is now something we have to take on seriously, we can instead ask ourselves, what's going on here? What may be going on here that we're assigning it to the worthiness wound, but really maybe there's something else. Maybe we're leaving feeling this way because somebody said something that really hurt our feelings. And we're going down a very predictable neural pathway instead of investigating what else it could be about. And maybe what you'll come to recognize or you'll come to notice is that, oh yeah, somebody said something that really hurt us. And damn it, I missed an opportunity to say something. Damn it, I missed an opportunity to advocate for ourselves. No, you didn't. The invitation that I'm urging you as an advanced relational skill is that the best way to learn how to advocate for ourselves in the moment is to bring it back up no matter how much time it's been. If you want to learn how to be able to stand up for yourself or speak up or say something in the moment, 1, relational psychotherapy can be a great help because that's what we do. But 2, to bring it up as soon as you can. So it's been a month, it's been 3 weeks, it doesn't matter. Bring it up. By the way, there was something that happened in that interaction. I'm still thinking about it. Can we talk about it? Hey, I know that in the moment I didn't say anything because I honestly didn't even realize that something was coming up for me. But after the fact, I realized I did not feel very good when we said this or when this happened. Can we talk about it? Okay. More that we can bring something up, no matter how long it's been, we're working on that muscle, that relational skill of saying what's in our mind as often as possible in the moment. It's a difficult relational skill. I really get it. I really worked on it this year. Certainly not perfect at it. Certainly still a work in process. But I continue to find that the more that I do it, 1, the easier it becomes. And the more often I do it, the easier it becomes, the faster it happens, the more I can catch it earlier. Rather than going right to the worthiness wound, I'm able to now catch, oh, wait a minute. Maybe this is something to do with the relationship. Maybe this is something to do with how I felt about the other person. Maybe this is something that I didn't say or wish I said. Instead of immediately going to, I'm too much, I'm too broken, I'm not enough. Like, what does that even mean? What are these words meaning? Again, there's a vagueness of the wound that makes it hard for us to then really work with it. And we try to work with it through something like New Year's resolutions. But really, what we may be invited to do is to try to bring more language to it, try to bring more words to what's happening. Instead of it all getting lumped into this big mass of undigested feelings, what if we could break it down, slow it down, get to know ourselves better? Maybe we can start to recognize that, oh, it's not that I was feeling too much. It's that this person said something that evoked a lot of feelings for me. And now there's an opportunity for us to talk about it, for me to know myself more deeply, for me to understand why is it that that thing really activated so much for me and what can I do about it? Okay. So those are my 3 big takeaways of this past year. It was a big year of learning for me. So much contraction. And in that contraction, I learned so much about where I'm at and what I continue to need to work on for myself. And, it helped me redirect some of my goals and not redirect, but I'm looking like reorganize my goals and my dreams. Periods of contraction can be really painful, but it can also be, I'm only saying this in retrospect, right? It can also be a really incredible moments of opportunity. But oh my goodness, it's hard in those moments, isn't it? And may we extend so much empathy to ourselves when we're experiencing heartbreak, rejection, or contraction, or a loss of some kind. It can feel so tender. And I think it makes so much sense that we try to assign some type of meaning about our brokenness, because if we're broken, we're moving into control. We can do something about it, right? It's a way that we orient ourselves. Well, if I'm broken, I can fix myself. I can do something about this. Rather than if it's because like we're disappointed about life, that's so much harder to then know what to do something about. But not everything's about doing something. Sometimes it's about sitting in something. And that was my kind of final part of that caption that I wrote on Instagram. Let this be the year you gently shift your focus from fixing to feeling, from striving to being, and from punishing to nurturing. I know these are just words that sound like pop psych salad in some ways, but there's something really at the core of it that's actually quite meaningful, of going from fixing your feelings, like there's something wrong, to what am I feeling and what's going on here and what may have been happening relationally. Things change when we can give it some space to, instead of assigning meaning that needs to be fixed, something that needs to just be with and to tend to and to explore more deeply within us. When we can make space for more of ourselves, we start to find our lovability, our inherent goodness. And that is my wish for all of you in 2025. Let this be the year where you prioritize your worth, your goodness, your enoughness. May you be able to hold your desires or aspirations without crumbling into your broken. May this be the year that you seek out goals in a way that will expand you rather than break you, because you are deserving of it. You are worthy of it, whether you feel like you are or not. And more of you is better. The more that you can bring of yourself into your life, the better your life is. I'm rooting for you. I believe in you. Thank you for being here. All of the links that I referenced in this podcast episode are in my show notes, so you can go learn more about getting on my newsletter list, about reclaiming worth, about working with me. And I will catch you all next time.